Well, we're delighted to have Bruno LeCoq, the co-founder, CEO, and CISO at BEMO. And today we're going to talk about the leadership truth about compliance. It's not just technical, it's cultural. But before we get to that, Bruno, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to found BEMO.
Yeah, so my background is I worked for 20 years at Microsoft, and I started BMO in 2010, and we do again cybersecurity and compliance for SMB across the US.
So focus on small and mid-sized companies. Why did you select that focus, Bruno?
I think again, from my past experience, Microsoft used to dealing with a big enterprise. And I always felt like, well, the small guys need the same level of security. They cannot afford it. But at the end, they are the ones that are easy to hack and easy to make money as a hacker. So I always felt like, hey, let's find a way to help those SMBs. And so again, we develop a lot of automation in order to make it happen.
No, and I think the SMB community appreciates it as well, because that is an underserved but growing area in the field of cyber compliance. All right, so let's kick things off. And I want to kick it off with the concept that compliance failure is very often a leadership and not a technical failure. So let's suppose a situation involving a company that experiences a major compliance breakdown. The immediate reaction is sometimes to blame a policy or a process or a technical control. But in your experience, how often is the real root cause actually a leadership problem rather than a compliance problem?
Oh, for me, it all starts from the top. Again, it goes back, the top are setting, the culture, they are setting the direction, and, employee knows what the leadership cares, and the employee do what the leadership cares. So if from a governance, from a compliance perspective, the leaders, the C-suite, we said, yes, we care, we manage our business to compliance, people will follow.
Now, I suppose many executives do believe that they have created a culture of compliance, but employees may be getting a different message. I remember a survey that I used to talk about when I presented on cybersecurity, and it was something like 2/3 of the leadership team surveyed would say they had implemented a policy or procedure, and 2/3 of the employees would respond by saying they had never seen it.
Yeah.
So how do you wrestle? What are the warning signs, I suppose, that the leadership's values are not filtering down into the organization, the culture of the organization itself?
Yeah, I guess for me, I always believe, again, from a compliance perspective, again, compliance is defining the what. Again, you may have the policy, it's what you should be able to do. But the culture defines how people will behave when no one is watching. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it's how you say it. Again, I will talk about my company. Again, we do tabletop exercise. We do a lot of exercise again every quarter. How do I make sure people will behave? How will they react? And the goal of it is to find holes. I prefer to, again, when I do my tabletop exercise or when I do my exercise with the company, let's find the issue now, not when we will really have an issue. And, there is no,
Can you describe briefly how your tabletop exercises work? There are many different ways to do it.
Yeah, so we do a simulation. Again, we do a simulation of a hacker. A hacker can do the system. And we do a simulation about, hey, how will the team behave? So in our site before, we will push a fake alert and we can see how the organization react. Again, from the SOC team to the engineering team to do they contact the leadership team? How long did it take, the whole process? So again, and you don't tell people when you do it. From our perspective, we don't tell because of course people are, so I want people not to know, is it a real one, fake one, so just.
So it's a hidden tabletop.
It's a hidden tabletop exercise.
Very interesting. I have found a lot of times when it's an announced tabletop and everyone's in the room, the vibe sometimes is, yes, we're doing everything we should be doing. This is going well. But
Yes,
really, that's not what should be happening in a tabletop, right? You should be progressing to failure.
exactly. Because, yes. Because from my perspective, when it's programmed, people come ready. The IT team will 2 days before will check their,
Hmm.
what are the steps I should be doing, what are the steps. But the goal is what happened the day a hacker is on your system. Oh, people are going to panic, not to panic. And I think it's an exercise of, again, we deal with cybersecurity and our customers are always surprised, like, oh, you guys are very calm. And I'm like, oh, we are like the surgeon in the operating room. You want the surgeon to just, case after case, no problem, it's the same. So we have to test the same thing. Our employee have to have the same calm. There is a hacker, I know how to do it.
I like that metaphor of surgery because I think
Yes.
that's what it is. Let me ask you about the middle management challenge, Bruno. I think a lot of times when we talk about leadership coming from the top and compliance is a leadership issue, we're thinking of C-suite executives. But many employees take their cues not from the CEO, but from the manager that's sitting 10 feet away, or the manager that they may be most commonly communicating with. So, in your experience, how important is middle management in shaping that compliance culture? And what mistakes do you think leadership makes when they ignore that middle management link in the chain?
I think, from my perspective, the middle management is almost the most important. They take the cue from the top, but they are the one that convert the cue into action with their employees. So if the C-suite tell you go right, but the middle management you go left, then you have a huge issue. And or the opposite of upper management will tell to the all hands meeting to all the employees, yeah, we do that. The middle management take it over, repeat, and then they get slapped in their hands like, okay, what happened? And people are not stupid. They see when there is a misalignment. I think it's very,
Mm-hmm.
it's very clear. So it's again, this is culture. Is how do people manage the message from the top to the bottom? How do they get feedback? It's for me is the same as is how do you run your business?
So everybody's busy, but and it's relatively easy to audit a firewall, implement a training program, or update a written policy. It seems to me it's much harder to assess whether people will actually do the right thing when they're under pressure.
Yep.
And you talked about the hidden tabletop as a means of testing that. But aside from that, how should the leaders of an organization go about determining whether they really have a culture of compliance as opposed to just a compliance program that might be out there somewhere but isn't really being brought into the heart of the organization?
Again, I see from people that come to us, potential customers. I can see first after 10 minutes, is the company looking for a checkbox of compliance, or do they really care about security and want to become compliant? So I think it's already so because for me, from the compliance perspective, the other part is not to do the security. The other part is the operational rigor, the cadence, the disciplines. And again, if I look BEMO, we are SOC 2, ISO, CMMC. So we have a cadence that we have to review weekly, monthly, quarterly. And, my old management has to sign up every month, every quarter. So again, and it's how, by now we don't even think it's compliance. It's how we run the business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Right.
a company that want to know, do they run it as just a checkbox or a compliance? They know it. They know if they do the amount of work is different.
And it sounds like the rigor and the regularity, that monthly check-in, those
Yes.
updates help
Yeah.
to just slowly
I'll,
and gradually
I
inculcate
always
that.
joke with my IT team, 10 years ago, every admin were pretty much global admin all the time. They were used to, you want to make a change, go make a change. Then came PIM. Oh, so now you want to be a global admin, you have to request access and you are global admin for 2 hours. I remember in those days when we made the change, the IT team were like, wow, it's extra step. Okay. Now, from a compliance perspective, it starts by a ticket. You want to do something as an IT, you open a ticket. What are you going to do? Why do you need to do it? And then you do your PIM and you do the process. So everything starts with a ticket. When we first did it, people that were not used to have to open a ticket each time I want to do something. Yes. And by now, people are realizing, whoa, I see the value of being able to trace, of being able to understand what, So again, it's a habit. It takes some time to make the change, but,
Let me rewind for a second and ask you a question, because as you were saying that and talking about comparing that culture of compliance to the checkbox format, it occurs to me that checkbox is out there. And one of the places that it still exists, I think, is in the cyber insurance application process. It's literally a checkbox.
Yes.
And we don't know what happens to those boxes once they're checked. But thought experiment, is it better to have a checkbox system than no system at all? Or is there something inherently problematic about just checking the boxes and moving on and hoping everything's okay?
So I feel like everything we do in life is almost a checkbox process, so you follow. But there is the meaning behind the checkbox. Do you really care, or is this just? So again, there's for me a difference when I talk compliance with a checkbox is someone said I want to be SOC 2. I'm SOC 2. I got my certificate, my asset attestation. Oh, great. And then what do you do? Do you check every month, or is just you will wait next year and you hope so? Even from us with, the rigor that we do, we have checked, checkbox. We have to check, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. So there's checkbox and checkbox.
Sure. No, that makes sense. All right. Let me shift gears and talk about incentives within an organization. So if I wanted to identify the true values of an organization, focusing on cybersecurity, I might ignore the mission statement, which is something some of us spend a ton of time on, and focus on what actually gets rewarded, punished, or celebrated. Not what we say, but what we actually do. How closely do you think incentives can drive compliance outcomes? And are there any cases you've seen over the years where some very well-intentioned incentives actually have a negative effect on the organization?
So around compliance, to be honest, I don't think I have seen company doing incentive. So and I see in my company we don't, because I feel like you have to be careful about rewarding or not creating the wrong motivation, and so we don't have a system, and I haven't seen customer doing it. So I almost feel like, again, it's part of the culture of the company. And if you have to have an incentive to have people behaving correctly, I think it's because you have the wrong culture.
Oh, that's a great point. No, thank you, Bruno. All right, Bruno, maybe this is a good closing question. Let's suppose a CEO comes to you and seems very sincere about compliance,
Yes.
but says something to the effect that, look, I don't see compliance as a leadership issue. I see it chiefly as an IT issue and a legal issue. So this is for the IT folks, the CISO, and the general counsel of our organization. How do you address that and maybe course correct the CEO's perspective?
So I will give an example. Again, I'm going to take CMMC. You want to be CMMC compliant. I will take that one. All right. Mm-hmm. To be CMMC compliant, you have to have your HR person. Again, they have to do a process, background check. There is, the whole process of you first need, when the person get onboarded, they have to follow a training program. You don't give them the admin access, or again, if they are going to join your IT team, they have to follow a training program before you can give them this level. So this is HR. Then you have the process of, the operation team. So I could give him 2, 3, or 4 examples of it's way outside, not only IT, not only, it's a company issue.
So one final question, open-ended for you, Bruno. This is truly the final question. We've had a nice discussion here, but only about 15 minutes or so. Certainly not as much as we would expect organizations to be thinking and talking about compliance. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think is really important when you're thinking about the fact that this is a cultural issue within the organization? What's one thing you would want to leave with our audience that would really focus this issue for them?
Yeah, I think is from my perspective, I haven't seen a single, again, today, we manage more than 500 companies. I haven't seen a single company being successful if they came from a perspective of compliance is a checkbox. And it's just not, I will just get it. They get a certification after a year or two, they fail the next one because they don't have the ongoing process. So again, from my perspective, I always tell my customer, if you don't need to go into compliance, don't go there because it's expensive.
Right.
But if you need to go there, you have to do it correctly. And again, it's always use the example. Achieving a compliance is like having a baby. You have your baby, but then after you have to handle the baby for the next 18 years because you have to remain in compliance. Same thing. So again, don't start compliance if you don't need it. But if you need, do it correctly.
Right. So compliance is an ongoing process. It's not just a check the box. It's something that starts and stays with the leadership of an organization, and the leadership has to work that down through middle managers to the employees on the ground to make sure that compliance is really part of the overall culture.
Yes. And for me, it's part of everyone in an organization. Everyone, for me, should have an objective around compliance.
Right. So even in my organization, I have to see that as my responsibility too. It's not something that someone else handles and they just tell me when I need to know something. I have to be proactive.
Agree.
All right. Well, Bruno LeCoq, thank you so much for joining us. Co-founder, CEO, and CISO of BEMO, one of the great cybersecurity compliance organizations out there that focuses on SMBs. Small and mid-sized businesses. And that's really where the action is when it comes to compliance, when it comes to attack prevention, threat actors. So it's something to be very vigilant about. Bruno, thank you so much for joining CyberSip.
Thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed having you. And thanks to all of you. We'll be back soon with another episode. The CyberSip podcast is available on barclaydamon.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Like, follow, share, and continue to listen.